I will hereby open the select board meeting, 6:04 p.m. We do have a quorum of 4. 5. We have everybody. We have 5.
Hello. Nobody can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. So we're going to open the Finance Committee meeting, and I take it, Sheila, you just said you had quorum too? All right, and this is by the Zoom. Do we need to read that again, Michael?
I gotcha,
or?
Yeah. Let me pull that up.
Well, I have it written down.
Oh, you do?
So.
Oh, I've got it right here.
Okay.
If the website loads, then we're good. Meetings of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen are recorded for transmission on Rutland Public Access Television and YouTube. Pursuant to Governor Baker's order of March 12th, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people who may gather in one place. This meeting of the Rutland Finance Committee and Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on Rutland's website at www.townofrutland.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: by watching on Rutland Community Television live on channel 192 or on the town's website www.townofrutland.org, or by viewing the recording of the meeting on the town's YouTube page following the meeting. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted, and every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Rutland's website a video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive recording of proceedings as soon as possible after that meeting.
All right. So what we're going to do tonight is go over the warrants with everybody, and let's get a feel for how both committees are feeling, and go from there, and try to get some good feedback so that going forward that we know where we all stand together collectively.
Ian, if I could too, I just want to note that there was some last-minute changes after some errors were noticed in some of the revenue side of things in the items that are in your Google Doc. Those have been fully updated. And the water sewer budget that Joe worked on is also included there, and that's why Joe's here in case there's any questions on that. But we can.
Yeah, that one, Joe. We're going to probably put that off in the Finance Committee till next week. We wanted to get this done tonight with just the warrant articles, and then next week the Finance Committee is going to go over your both those budgets that you gave us, if that's okay with you. I think it makes it easier.
May I ask, before Joe leaves, Joe, is there anything you want to leave us with as we begin the review of your documents?
No, I'm going to sit here for a while. I'm not heading out yet, so I planned on attending. I expected to have a review of the water and sewer tonight, but we do have some articles and some stuff in there, so I'll sit through some of that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
If I could just jump in just quick, I'm sorry. The only thing we did say, Sheila, is at this point we're not recommending raises in rates. The budgets are very conservative, but at this time we're trying to stay away from that.
And we'll, yeah, like I said, we'll look at that for next week. We're going to be going through all of that, which is, there's just so many articles and different things that we're looking for money, and we're not sure where we're going to be. So, Mike, you want to start with the
sure
articles? And
you got it. Article or motion?
Let's do the motions first.
The motions, okay.
As you're grabbing them, I'm trying to. I keep touching buttons here, and I keep screwing up. I got you. So the snow and ice is the first one?
Yes, that red number is going to change and go down. That's last year's number. This year's number is closer to 30,000. However, where we just had a random snowfall last week, I didn't want to plug in a number at this time there. Hopefully from here on out, we'll have a better view, but that's why. And like I said before, any numbers here that you see in red are subject to change based on either current expenditure rates or on budget, how the budget's going, because they're the budget votes themselves.
Yeah, we were like 29,000.
Yeah.
Last time I saw it, 29,143. And I'm sure that's changed a little bit, but
yeah, probably going to be close to 33 if we're being conservative. It could go up closer to 40. I don't see it going that much higher than 40 though.
If this weather would ever stop.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions on
Sanders
that?
away
Or, comments?
Was that, Joe?
We have not put the plows or the Sanders away yet.
Don't
Oh
jinx it.
God, that's terrible.
And
It's
why
the
not?
truth.
It might be.
We are in Rutland. We expect that. All right. So that gives us at least an idea of the 29, 33,000, somewhere in that range. And there's nothing we can do with that. That's the deficit spending that we have to cover. So let's move on to the next one,
This is the
which is the $5,800 from free cash.
yes. So this is from Chief Monaco. This is to buy 2 solar-powered radar signs and the software that goes with them, so we can track speeds on the different roads that these go. These can be moved from one place to another around town. And if you're driving in downtown Hubbardston, right in front of the Hubbardston Public Library, going toward Rutland from Gardner, you'll see an example of these signs. They're the ones that flash how fast you're driving compared to the speed limit. So that is what this is. This would be 2 of them with the connecting software.
And now you're saying that we actually were able to see how many cars are doing over the speed limit or under the speed limit based on those signs?
Yep.
So would the chief be using that to set up radar blocks?
Yep.
All right. Any other people that have comments, questions, either side?
This is Jeff. I believe it's not used in conjunction with an officer. It's something that you would leave static attached
Yes,
to a pole or something like that. It's an advisory when people are going too fast. It's something that you could put in a neighborhood if a neighborhood has been having complaints, or like in the area of the ball field during the season, that you could use it to bring to people's attention. So I mean, we've seen those before. It seems like low money in there, so I think it's the type that attaches to a pole, not like the trailer type.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, and again, what was said earlier, we can move it from place to place. So if this leads to us seeing that there's increased speed in some place and this isn't fixing it, we can put a speed trap somewhere near it to try to catch those people.
So we would definitely have a lot of backup on the speeds that are actually people are actually going in those areas.
Yes.
And as we move them, would that give us like a mapping of that road, or is it just based on us writing down where it is?
I mean, there's some, it's a tool. There's some data collection with it, but a lot of it's just for us having a sense of idea. I wouldn't say it's a full data tracking system, especially when there's only 2 of them.
I think it's really for the neighborhoods to bring awareness to people in the neighborhoods in response to like speeding complaints and things like that.
Any comments from the board on what your thoughts are? Anybody out there?
So, Ian, I think the issue we have with this set of warrant articles, i.e. the ones that typically would have been on a special town meeting warrant right before, that we're trying to compress everything in an effort to ensure that the meeting goes as expeditiously as possible. I think from the board's perspective is we would love to have, and this is a little bit cart and horse, right? Typically the FinCom is going to get a completed set of warrant articles that the board has placed and then vote to recommend them.
Correct.
I think it would be a wonderful thing if the board had, in advance of placing them, and a preliminary FinCom finding on their level of support, even if it were really just a straw poll vote. And the biggest thing with that is the bottom line question of how much money we want to leave in free cash should we need it in the coming fiscal year because of possible state cuts.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we're talking about too. Dave?
Basically same thing. We want as much free cash in there as possible, not knowing what the future brings.
Yeah.
I mean, any comments from anybody on the finance board about the 5800 and the solar powered radar signs?
Well, so my only question would be whether or not the two signs are going to be on opposite sides of the same road, or are they going to be dispersed in various places around town?
The latter of the two.
Okay.
The only other thing too, when they're placed, will there be a public campaign so people are aware that we know, and will there be teeth behind it when people obviously are speeding?
Yeah, at first it'll be hey, this is to help us for the people who are like, oh, I didn't know what the speed limit is here, just as a notification. And then if it continues as an issue, that's when we send an officer there after it's been a while. The common practice for these is you have it in a location for 2 weeks, have people see it, and then after those 2 weeks are done, you put a speed trap there if you notice that the speeds aren't slowing down.
And will people be made aware of it? Will they be made aware of it before this happens?
As in before it's located somewhere?
Yeah, like will it be in the newspaper? Keep your eyes open. We're watching you. I don't know. No, seriously. I mean,
no, it's a good idea. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You know,
that's the worst headline I've ever heard for a newspaper article.
I mean,
you know,
those signs are pretty visible. Once you see them for the first couple, we can't take pictures of them if that's what you're asking for. Taking plates, license plate numbers, or any of that. That's not part of what this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just a sign telling the person, hey, slow down, or this is the speed you're doing in that area. So it's not that we can, issue a ticket from these signs. Is that correct, Mike?
Correct. Yes.
okay.
I did talk at the last selectmen's meeting that we had. The board did ask me to go back to the department heads who submitted articles and see if there were other ways to fund these, or if these could wait to the fall. This is something that could wait to the fall if we're in a spot where we need to check our free cash.
Problem is, like that in the fall, we might be wanting to hold even more free cash because we're going to be cutting the budget so much that we're going to have to watch out for any overages.
The other thing to think about, though, in the long run, is this going to save us money because of police time, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, that's a pretty cheap as things go. I know we're tight, but how much does it cost us per hour for police,
Mm-hmm.
But money
to that point, I'm sorry, I think I'm just having a hard time because I'm remotely participating here. To that point, though, like a police officer can be revenue generating where the sign is not. So, I mean, if we have, like, for example, the motorcycle, I think, Mike, you had talked earlier about how that is revenue generating for the town.
Yes.
Because of the tickets they issue with it. A sign wouldn't be, and a police officer could be, and I think that's the only consideration when it comes to the financial impact.
But the purpose of traffic enforcement isn't to generate revenue. It's public safety awareness, and I think from where the chiefs, can't speak for the chief, but where they get calls all the time from citizens saying, hey, this is a problem, where you wouldn't want to have an officer sitting on a remote road. You could put this out there. People would bring attention to these people. And we also discussed at the last meeting, was noted that this is the only submission from the chief. So I think he had been pretty conservative in his picking and choosing what his battle would be for this spring meeting.
Yes, and I mentioned this at the last meeting. If Ian and Sheila, if that's okay, if I just pipe in here for a second. The when I did sit down with the department heads to go over the articles that they submitted, there were some that we left out of the warrant just for the on the basis that we had already talked about having this town meeting be a light and easy town meeting. So some of the bigger items I pulled from the list before they even made it onto the warrant here. And if they were close or not that much, I put them on so that we could have a discussion about those further. Some of the things that were on that list that I didn't put here were $80,000 for a master plan, a new van for the animal control officer, a new fire alarm system for the library, different things like that were not included in the warrant.
Okay,
but
so
were submitted. Yeah.
Let's go back to where we were talking with the finance committee. I mean, guys, what are your thoughts? And let's just, if everybody could make a comment and go from there. So somebody want to start us off, Dave or Tom, or?
I think we should go ahead and get these.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Peter?
I agree with that.
Okay. Dave?
I don't have any problem with these.
Karen?
I guess, you know, we got
I mean,
$200,000 we got to find, guys. So we're going to have to start really being careful because we're going to be cutting these budgets so tight. All it's going to take is one officer to get sick, one fireman to get sick. We're going to have to be doing overtime, and we're going to have to pay that with free cash. So we've got to be very cautious. I've been through these before, and then we're really hurting. So we've got to be cautious. If these things can wait until we know how the year plays out, we might be better off.
So do we know where we are? I mean, I saw 141 today.
Yeah, 141 is the current number.
And what do we know about what's not in the budget? Like the schools?
Nothing.
So I mean, the budget-wise, I mean, we're going to have to, we're just waiting for some more state numbers, which we don't have. Think about nobody spending money on the lottery. You know, what is the schools going to be? Are we going back to school? Those are all issues that I think we have to wait on. Tonight is just, let's talk about these articles. I want to keep it as simple and as clear on these articles. And Karen brings to the point that we're not sure where the cash is. And, you know, it's $5,800. Yeah, it's not a lot of money, but is there also some grant money that we may be able to get to cover that?
So, Ian, would it be appropriate to say that what we're looking to be able to do is get a sense of whether or not we would or would not recommend this for approval?
Correct.
Okay, so we're not voting on anything. We're not saying that we've got to worry about $5,800. I mean, not at this point. If this just sounds philosophically correct for us to do, we might want to just say, yeah, I think this is good.
Right. That's where we're at this point. We don't know exactly what we have, you know, how much we know the free cash number. Does it make sense to spend it on these things? Do we think that we should do that? And I think that's where we're at right now as a finance committee.
Ian, Sheila also has her hand up. I know it's hard to see people because I got my screen shared currently, so I just figured I'd say.
Can't see anybody. Okay.
If I could just add to that philosophy piece, we could make a very easy decision and say this is something that we know we need. Our department head has indicated he has needed it for quite some time. I think the question becomes, what do we want this meeting to look like? Because the discussions that we're having now mirror the discussions that will happen with the moderator on the floor. And I think probably, at least in my mind, our goal moving forward for this upcoming town meeting is to make it as low stress and lacking in any major confrontation as possible. So if there's something that we think people are going to have concerns with, an extended discussion, particularly if there are going to be more people concerned about that bottom line of how much free cash are we leaving on the table, that's a question we have to ask ourselves, I think, in the bigger picture, which is almost not so much do we need it? I think we know we need it. The question is, do we place it now and ask the residents to make that decision about needing it?
And
I
Ted
had a
also.
question. Ian.
I had a couple of questions. First is, do we have a date for the meeting yet? And I get the sense that this is not time where we have to say yes or no to this expenditure.
So the board has not yet set the date for town meeting. Mike can probably speak better to the legislation. I think he's kind of gone over it with a fine tooth comb. We know we have a legislative requirement to have the election by June 30th. If we were to keep to the town's typical calendar, i.e. typical meeting, we have a town meeting just prior to an election, that would put our town meeting on the last Saturday of June. Otherwise, we would have to go into a 1/12 budget because the fiscal year would end without us having voted on a budget.
Yes, Sheila is correct in that the town meeting does not have to be by June 30th like the election does. The election does have to be on or before June 30th. If the town meeting goes from July 1st onward, and even then there's talk about having a new statutory deadline of August 1st for municipal budgets being passed. There'd have to be a 1/12 budget for the month of July where we take the current fiscal year's budget divided by 12, and that's our allotment of spending. And then anything else after that, if there's more spending than what's allotted for in this current year's budget divided by 12 that we need to spend in July, we take that directly out of our free cash.
So going back to Sheila's point, if we look at this as a $5,800 expenditure, how do we feel that the town will address this? Is this going to create agita amongst people, or do we think that this is something that's just going to flow through?
I have one thought on that. What I think, Ian, you said that was the only, or somebody said that was the only request the chief made. Is that, Mike, was that true?
Yes, from Chief Monaco, yes.
Okay, so if once, because Sheila, you're probably going to be the person they were going to yell at. You know, if we address it as this was the main concern, a main request of the budget from the police chief, and it's only $5,800, and is it going to save one life? I mean, to me, I'm sitting in the audience, I'm like, I want it.
The problem again there is, and it's Karen spoke out earlier, is if we do have a officer that gets sick, and then you've got other people off, now you're going to need that extra money that's going to have to come out of free cash to put boots on the street. You know, that's the issue right now. So are we talking, is the traffic sign or is it boots on the street? Maybe, possibly. Those are things that we need to keep in the back of our minds.
I would just say, this is Jeff, that I would believe that the chief is cognizant of that because he manages his own budget. And for him to put the 5,800 item forward, it has to be the priority, as Sheila said, from the police department. And as executives of the town, I think I always like to err on the side of supporting our agency heads and the chief. And if the chief thought into this, and this is what he's putting forward, I would just support that because that's what's important to the chief.
Jeff, I would agree with you. I mean, I more to support the departments. The problem, you know, when was this put in? Before a lot of this stuff is happening too, you know, and as Michael said earlier, the chief was willing to put this off. It's one of the things he thought could go through later.
It could also be a cruiser item, you know, or something like that. Maybe we could push it back, table it, and move on.
Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were done. My bad, your audio cut out. I just wanted to point out that Mitch has his hand raised on the select board side.
Okay, I can't see him.
Sorry.
So sorry, Mitch.
Yeah, no, I'm on my phone tonight. I think we can all just assume that everybody here supports fire and police, and we don't have to go around the table and say the same thing. But realistically, some of these items too, I know we have another one coming up for fire. I think these are good items, and I think you had made the point earlier, Ian, that these can be grant funded. You see a lot of these municipalities that are grant funded, so even if we decide to maybe not move on this as a kind of a financial precaution, that doesn't mean that coming into the busy grant season of the summer heading into the fall, that there aren't going to be opportunities to pick it up that way as well. So maybe if we put it off to the fall, we can get it funded in the interim and then make a commitment that we would be something that we can look at in the fall as being supportive of if we can.
So would that be a recommendation that we could make to the chief to say, let's take it off of the warrant and let's put it, let's ask him to be able to submit his grant and see where that goes. And then after that, we can decide to bring it back to the warrant maybe in the fall.
Well, yeah, we don't have that warrant. I mean, the select board has to set the warrant still, which they haven't done.
Right.
So, Sheila?
So the chief is well versed in not always getting every warrant article placed that he requested. This will not necessarily come as a surprise to him. I'd like to think he will not take this as anything other than what we are talking about tonight, which is, of course, we all still support his department and the work that they are doing, but that it's just simply something fiscally that in a very, very dangerous time that we have to hold off on.
Okay.
Well, Sheila,
Yes.
I mean, is that the opinion of the board, or could we call a vote on that? Because I don't feel the same way.
We will absolutely call a vote on every single warrant article and its placement separately. Yep. This is really more to hear about the FinCom's take on them before we place them.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's what this meeting's exactly all about, Sheila. So good. Thank you. All right, let's move on. So you have some ideas. Let's move on to Article 3.
All right, we'll do. I will say too, while my screen is the one that's shared, I am able to view everyone here. I don't mean to be stepping on the toes of either the two chairs. It's just I can see when people have their hands up. So I just wanted to throw that out. I meant no disrespect.
No, I appreciate it. I know I can't see them, so.
Article 3 is to appropriate the money that was appropriated this past fall at town meeting for the community center walkway. We were able to get that money in a grant from the Massachusetts Office on Disabilities. So since that is being paid for, and the work should actually be starting on that rather soon, Joe, correct? Well, Joe is unmuting. I can say that we did get the grant for that. So this is releasing that money from the article that was passed at town meeting and putting it towards some other work that needs to be done at the community center with the 2 exterior doors, and then some work on the cabinets where they're having some holes and a mouse issue.
Dave?
Did you imply this was tied to the walkway work?
Yes.
We were adamant with the consulting engineer that the work be done in advance of July 4th, and they're sticking to their current schedule. Plans and specs have already been developed. I don't know if it's gone up for bid yet, but I'm sure they'll adhere to the same schedule.
And this other work, Joe, needs to get done?
Yeah, I'm not that close to this particular aspect of it. I didn't review it in advance. No, I don't. Okay. I honestly just can't speak to it. That's all.
That's fine.
I'm aware of the mouse issue. We did try and help out with that, and I can tell you firsthand that that building needs constant repairs. But this particular aspect, I hadn't reviewed it in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, this would be the front door and the door to the kitchen.
Mike. So no impact on the budget?
No.
Okay.
Mike, can you remind us what the original Article 13 stated? Do we have that anywhere?
Yes, and I believe it was for senior center walkway repairs. Let me see if I can pull that out. Oh, actually, did that just change your screens?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's okay. Maybe if we add that to the language, because that will be the first thing people will ask, which is, well, what was Article 13 meant to be to begin with?
Okay.
Mike, my list says community center walkway.
All right. Perfect. So yeah, I'll make sure that's.
And Mike, this isn't an issue to change this, or if we suggested otherwise, where would that money end up? Just sitting there because it wasn't used, or
correct?
Could it go back to the?
No. So it's been appropriated. Once it's appropriated, it's appropriated. If we don't use it, it just sits in this bucket until town meeting chooses to use it for another purpose. So there's no way to make it fall back to free cash, but it's money that's sitting there that we can use. And there's a couple of articles like this where it's money that was previously approved for appropriation at a previous town meeting that either there's leftover money in or we ended up having it grant funded or done by something else. So with this one where we got the grant and the work's being done through the grant for the equivalent amount, we can use the money for something else.
Hey, Mike, I don't know if that's 100% correct. If the article is not used, then the purpose for the article and whoever had the article, whatever group or whatever department, can say that the money's not used and it would revert back to free cash. And or there could be an article on the warrant that says it's going back to free cash rather than to something else.
So we have articles going back to I think the one that we have that's the oldest that still has an appropriation in it is from 2006. That's still sitting in a bucket because it was appropriated and not used.
Right, but whoever had that article could say I'm not using it and the money would revert back. It's happened lots and lots of times in the years past. Unless some laws changed or something else has changed.
So just
I don't see why that wouldn't happen. I had another question, so I thought we were going to modify this motion to say the kitchen door, so we understood it was the kitchen door and not the kitchen itself.
Yeah, I'll write that down so I remember.
You're right.
Yeah.
And then here's a good spot. If we need money for other things that are going to, this is a good place. This money could go back to free cash and then we could reappropriate it for the other work at some future point.
So we can check with Dan on the process. Tom's partly right. There is a process, but it is a relatively complicated one to release an appropriation made from a previous article in a special town meeting and get that money moved. What we have done in the past, and Dan is well accustomed to it, is he has been scrubbing our articles for years now, ensuring that any money that has been sitting there ended up being moved and used for a purpose that has become more time sensitive. And of course, we've learned our lesson, I think, over the years where in some cases we've made the article broad enough that it would have covered the new work without having to go back to town meeting. That's clearly not the case here, right? We went into town meeting with a very specific request of the town to repair the exterior walkway. That's the way the language read. And so here we are now. We know, as Joe pointed out, that building is in constant need of repairs. We know for sure that those exterior doors have serious ADA compliance issues. So I think it's probably money well spent on a parallel project at the same location.
I think it comes down to also, is it $18,000 worth of repairs, Sheila? I mean, that's just for two doors, or is it, I think that needs to be ready for somebody's comment back,
Yep.
We can check that.
It just seems an awful lot of money to fix that. Carol?
No, I didn't have anything to say.
Oh, okay.
I would just say that's just the equivalent appropriation number that was made in the fall. That's where that number comes from.
Yep. But that may not be, so there again, it's not the same. You can actually take money out of that. It doesn't have to be the total amount, Mike. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct.
Can you just make it clear, Ian or Mike? I'm still a little confused. So the walkway is being handled by a grant that's separate from this 18,000?
Yes. In fact, the grant gave us the exact same number. We put this in case we didn't get the grant. And then we got the grant the week after town meeting.
But we still do need to fix at least the exterior doors because of the ADA, et cetera, and the place is falling apart, let's face it. But to Ian's point, or anybody's, can we take and do the exterior doors and save some of that money? I mean, I can't imagine is it really going to cost $18,000?
No. And so we say we
quiet, Sheila.
No. No, I was going to say, so to that point and the point that Ian just made, we could in fact change the article language a little bit to make it broader and essentially say, look, we were going to use this $18,468. That was an actual bid amount that we knew it was a specific amount. We were going to use it for a walkway. However, now we're going to take that amount. It's already been appropriated and use it to repairs at the community center done.
Love it.
Yeah, as opposed to coming up with, well, we don't exactly know what the exterior doors are going to cost. In fairness, I think ADA compliant doors in that building are probably more than $18,000, but Joe knows better than me.
But it's not big doors. I mean, it's not, it doesn't cover like half the building or anything.
No.
I know, I'm cheap.
No, I think if you talk to Kerry about the button and the electrical opening, it's expensive.
Yeah. Mitch has his hand raised.
I mean, to that point, I understand where we're going with the conversation, but to that point, if you make the articles too vague for that purpose of being able to have more discretionary use of the funding, it's kind of the antithetical effect that you want to have a town meeting, right? That people should have the most transparency possible as to what the money's being spent on, not kind of a potpourri of things that the money could be used for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fine line we walk.
Ted and
Leah. Oh, no, that's not a fine line. It's not making the articles broad so people know what they're voting on.
Do we have a quote on the exterior doors?
No, we are in the process of getting that.
So then we should probably table this until we find out what that's going to be and then decide how the language is going to be. Can we do that?
I mean, nothing's been in place yet.
Okay, so.
Yeah, Carol, so everything tonight, Carol, we're just talking about and trying to give the select board some of our ideas of what we're thinking, because they have not placed an article yet on the town warrant.
Ted and Leah both had their hands raised. I don't know if you
My question was pretty much the same as Carol's, and my thought would be, let's get an exact quote and only spend that amount of money.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate what Mitch was saying in the sense that I feel like, especially for that building, we need to be a little bit more specific than not, because there are so many repairs and the use of that building has been up in the air for so long. You know, anywhere from it's going to be torn down to it's a dedicated senior center to it's a dedicated community center to we don't know. So I think that the more specific we can be with the money being spent on repairs that would benefit whatever the use of continuing the use of that building would be is beneficial for that space.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think we're all on the same page at this point. All right, let's move on then to the next one, Article 4.
Article 4, Chief Knipe and I have talked about this one as it was brought up at the Selectmen's meeting. This is to appropriate $10,000. It's a $10,000 after reimbursements from free cash into the public safety buildings purchase services line item. He said this could be done with a reserve fund transfer if we wanted to keep this out of free cash and something else, or we could look at his budget a little tighter to see what he has remaining in his existing line items to see if we keep that in this year and not with a free cash appropriation. But that is the discussions we've had since the last meeting on this.
What is it for?
I'll pull up. He had an email that he sent that's included in your Google Drives.
I've got it here if you want me to read it, Mike.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. We have $1,250 for security door and key fob repairs. We have $1,000 for elevator repair after state inspection. We have $2,450 for trash removal. Moved to this account 2 years ago from DPW due to that account being underfunded. This expense was never part of this line item. $2,500 for water/sewer rate increase not budgeted. $2,200 increase in electric bill, and $2,090 for COVID-19 building cleaning contract, FEMA reimbursable.
That totals at $10,000.
It's $11,490.
And then we're seeing what of that can be reimbursed from FEMA.
Right.
Okay.
Just a quick thought for part of this, but going forward on it, Mike. The $2,450 trash removal, is that, we talked about this a little bit last time, is that going to be part of his budget, or is that going back to the DPW and that's coming out of there? And you were going to check on how we were charged by that company as well.
Yes, we are still in the process of doing that there. It just took a little while with the trash company's office not being staffed as often as it normally would be under non-pandemic circumstances.
Yeah. So where is that money on next year's budget?
Right now, our trash is all in DPW. However, I have to check with the chief to see if he included that on his end. That is a discussion that we currently have ongoing, and I have a Zoom call with him on that tomorrow.
Okay, because I was looking and I couldn't see it in the budget.
Yeah.
So.
So,
Okay.
so from a
Yeah, usually. Oh, go ahead.
So from a personal standpoint, I would love to see this article go away through some combination of him finding internal line items that have a little bit of money saved, maybe a reserve fund transfer. Currently, we haven't touched that. There's $20,000 in it, but as per usual, at least there was $20,000 as of 4/6. That was the last expenditure report I'm looking at. As per usual, you know, this time of the year, we're usually at our cap as far as legal goes, and we've typically done a reserve fund transfer to cover the end of year legal expenses as they come up, particularly preparing for these meetings, which tends to be the last thing we do. So, you know, we've got a little bit of movement there, but if he can get this down a little lower and we can pull it off of the articles and do it through Finance Committee as a partial reserve fund transfer, we might be in better shape.
I will, just to clarify too, we probably will need a legal reserve fund transfer at some point before the end of the fiscal year. And we have already spent $5,000 out of the reserve fund, and that's how we got to $20,000.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And that was for.
I myself would like to see this placed as a warrant article so that Seth can stand up in front of the town and explain how he can't budget correctly. Well, no one else is going to say it, so I will.
So, Karen, do you have any other opinions?
Well, I mean, the trash removal was moved there 2 years ago. And for 2 years, he hasn't budgeted. I mean, come on, it's not like it was just moved. It's 2 years ago.
I mean, I can see that the first couple of things, the security door and the elevator repair, you know, the water sewer rate increase, we all knew was coming.
Right.
I think the electric was high last year too.
Yep.
Are we working on that electric bill, Mike? Is that,
yes,
if I remember correctly?
Yes, we are currently working on that.
So that might be down.
Yeah.
As well.
I mean, for next year. This year's costs are the same, but.
Okay, so that number is the number. The 2,200 is an increase.
Yes.
Shouldn't this article be written with some of those items in this article so people know what it is that is? This is just here's another one. It's just 10 grand to go to something. It should be. Shouldn't it be listed out? What's
the guidance that I was given from our legal counsel is wording like this. And then if people ask, we can have additional information available for them. But this is the guidance that we've got from our town council.
I think that's just going to make the meetings go longer if we're trying to get it slower. If they have the information in front of them, I think it'd be better.
Yep.
I mean, the what I was saying, where information available is like the handouts that we've given out.
Gotcha.
In terms of language for the warrant and the motion, this is what was there, and then clarify that in the handouts that we have.
I'm with Sheila on this as well. I'd love to see some of this go away, and let's look at the budgets from what's left and hasn't been used based on things that we've done.
That's a good idea too.
I'm in favor of that.
Maybe somewhat less also if we get money back from FEMA. So, I mean, you already said, what, 2,400 we think we're getting back?
Yes.
So, and there may be additional.
That would, yes, $2,090 out of the $11,490. So, yeah, I'd like to see him take a look at everything, see what we have left in that account, different accounts. Any other comments? I can't see if anybody's raising a hand, so.
Nope, I don't see anyone here.
All right, let's move on.
Article 5, appropriate $1,500 to bind and preserve previous town meeting minutes and warrants. I went back to get further information on this from Anita, as the Finance Committee asked. The last set of town meeting warrants and minutes, if you remember, we print these on special paper so that they can be bound eventually and they're put into books. The last set that we have bound are the warrant and minutes from 1988.
Oh my God.
Since then, they're in binders currently in Anita's safe. This is to send those binders off to a professional book binder so that they'll have a hardcover book binding. for our records.
So this $1,500 covers everything from 1988 on?
Anita thinks that this will cover at least through the early 2000s. But it's a step in the right direction. She wanted to do a little at a time. Jeff has his hand raised.
I thought we were moving towards digitizing. I think that was part of the discussion on why we needed those two scan plotter.
Yes.
And
there are certain records we're not allowed to have digital copies only. Town meeting warrants and minutes is the one where we actually have to have a paper copy in our storage record.
so this is a necessary expense.
Yes.
All right.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I just got a question. There's been no other articles since 1988 to bind town. Seems to me we appropriated money in between here somewhere to do record binding.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. This actually has come up fairly recently. It was pretty much after we got through sort of the worst of the recession years when Anita came in a few years ago and said, can we start doing this piecemeal? We'll do it a little bit at a time. And so that she started obviously from the oldest and she's working her way forward. You know, this is one of those things where in any other time we'd say, oh my gosh, this is small money. Of course we want to do this. It's going to have to get done at some point. And it is small money. So is this one that you let go? But again, could it wait till the fall? It's another $1,500. I struggle with these so much. These are the ones that, you know, back in say 2010, we would have just shrugged our shoulders and said, there's no money. Right now, there is money. We just don't know if we're going to need it.
I believe that we should get these done because we need to, but my point was, I think we've appropriated, what Mike was just saying, it sounded like we didn't do anything about these since 1988. They may be the last ones, but I think there's been money appropriated for doing records.
You are correct. Yes, there have been the ones from like the 70s and earlier that we've done in recent years. It's just the last one that we have bound is 88. We don't have 89 forward bound yet.
I got you. Okay.
So, Mike, are we required to have them bound or just keep them in a safe place?
Keep them in a safe place. It's just easier to do if they are bound. They're less likely to have damage to them.
So maybe this should be something that's looked at in a broader picture to say, let's bring everything up to date one time, and maybe in the future, certainly not now, but bring everything up to date. And then as we go forward, there would be a budget line in somebody's expense budget to make sure that this happens.
I mean, because I would like to know. I'd like to know how many we're getting done for this 1,500.
Yeah, I can get that for you.
Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Is it 10 years? You know, just give us an idea so that we would have that idea that Peter's saying. That what is the numbers? You know, so every year we could say it's $50 or it's $150. You know.
Yeah.
Put it in Mike's budget.
Mitch, I see your hands up.
No, yeah, just to kind of echo what was just said, I think that's a really good idea to, you know, once we can get caught up, just keep it an ongoing thing. I know this isn't really like a super high priority now, and I kind of agree with Sheila on this in that we're asking other people to potentially make tough cuts for, you know, items that have a much more visible positive impact in the community because of the budget uncertainty. For me, this would be a no-brainer choice because it's not really necessary. And it really doesn't have any public benefit other than to keep things organized. But moving forward, maybe we can start looking at this as kind of a yearly or annual expense so we can build that in and we don't have to revisit this in 2037 or whenever the next time we look at it's going to be.
Oh God, I'm not here then.
It should be. This should be a line item in their budget. All right, let's. Any other comments on this, or can we move forward? All right, 6.
Article 6 is to appropriate. Again, this is one I need to change the number on here. I've got a running list based off of discussions we've had. This is 15,750 is the actual number to purchase 2 signs that were recommended by the traffic study that was done at the intersection of East County Road, Route 68, and Wachusett Street, to place 2 solar-powered red light flashing stop signs at the intersection that are extra large stop signs with a crossbar that says cross traffic does not stop. Director Buckley can talk a little bit more about this, but this is the signage that was recommended from that study done by Ty and Bond that we approved at the fall town meeting. And I do see that Jeff has his hand up.
Just real quick, again, with the transparency, it's going to prompt questions and discussions unless you say that it's for 2 stop signs, LED solar powered stop signs as recommended by the DPW director.
Joe?
No, he's just asking questions about the syntax.
Yeah, no, I know. I didn't know if you had anything else you want to say about
no, we reviewed it pretty in depth at the recent selectmen's meeting, and there's a lot of good documentation. It'd probably be best I can field questions.
Ted has his hand up, and so does Mitch. So,
would it be appropriate in the language to include that this was a result of the study that we approved at the last meeting? And then this would be a question for Joe. Was there a reason why the rumble strips was not suggested?
We basically followed the recommendations from the engineer. There is some additional striping that they've recommended and some repaving that would do something similar to rumble strips that we're going to fund via Chapter 90. That was also recommended.
Yeah, this is just part 1 of a 2-part recommendation from the study. This is 3-part, excuse me. The rest Joe was planning to take out of Chapter 90 funding. And then, yes, we can certainly add that into the language of the article. Mitch?
Yep, thank you. I guess my question would be, because as part of that study, Joe, there were some interesting things, and I think you can kind of make inferences as to, you know, some of the things that are happening over there. We've had a couple bad accidents, as everybody knows. You know, these accidents, I think we talked about at the last meeting, they're occurring at non-peak times, it's high rate of speed, so it might indicate that people are not familiar with the intersection or coming from out of town or whatever it might be. Could it be that this, if we just complete phase 1, that makes enough of a change over at that intersection to where we could take a look at this, not a whole study or fund something, but just take a look over the course of a year and say, you know, maybe we don't need the phase 2 and 3 or the extensive additional costs associated with the one intersection that was kind of highlighted in the other parts of this project?
I just want to call out, we asked for 2 basic recommendations. We asked for one that was more cost effective and straightforward, and one that was a Cadillac, for lack of a better description. We knew going into this discussion that we would not be able to fund all of the first recommendation or phase 1 with free cash. So that's why we broke the first recommendation into 2 pieces, funding the signs with free cash and funding the paving and striping with
Chapter 90
funds.
And I will add to that too.
Is your question, Mitch?
Yeah. I will add too that we are weighing out how much of what was recommended we would actually do. If you look at the traffic study, it actually recommends putting islands in at that intersection to slow people down, and that's something that Chief Knight in particular had a concern with, and Joe had a concern with the plowing processes of the road there as well. So we are evaluating it, and it is exactly what you said. If something works good at phase 1, why do we need to jump all the way to phase 3 too? Leah, I saw your hand was up.
No, I just kind of wanted to clarify that my understanding was kind of the first piece, the first set of recommendations, we kind of internally broke up into phase 1 and phase 2 is my understanding.
Yes.
And that the one phase would need to be funded through free cash, which is the stop signs and the additional signage. And then the other piece of that kind of first recommendation was what would be coming out of Chapter 90. I think that's just my own clarification, but maybe that's clarification for everybody.
No, you're right, Leah.
Carol has her
Is there no? I mean, I was down that road the other day, and I don't see a speed sign stopping it from the 40 miles an hour that you first see when you come on the road till when you get down to the stop signs. Whereas usually a good distance before a stop sign, there should be something saying, you know, speed limit should drop. Is that something that I'm missing? Did I mean, I just didn't see it.
I agree. That's a question I was going to ask as well. But the second question, every time I go by that intersection, I want to know why, and maybe this is something laws, why we don't have a stop sign. Why can't we have a permanent, why is there cross traffic that doesn't stop? We're asking for trouble.
That's a big part of the study. Can I interrupt you, Mike? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
The first couple pages in there make sure that everything meets current state and federal codes, and it does. To put a stop sign in and lower the speed limit on 68, I frankly don't think the state would let us do that.
I was actually talking, Mike, about the Wachusett
Street. Yes. So to Carol's point, and let me just jump to that quick. The cross traffic doesn't stop. That's what we'd be getting with this. So that would be putting that up there on Wachusett Street. To put those signs up on 68 itself and make it a four-way stop, we need approval from the Commonwealth, which is something they've indicated they most likely would not approve.
But can't we put, I'm sorry, can't we put permanent, regular, everyday stop signs instead of $15,000 for flashing things that then get moved?
Oh, these would be permanent ones.
Oh, they're permanent.
Oh, so we are changing the whole, okay, good. That's.
Yeah. I mean, there are stop signs there already.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're oversized.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I'm thinking of the different one. Okay, thank you.
This would be the exact same thing that you see at the Quinnipoxet intersection in Holden.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, so I have just about 3 months ago almost got killed there. Somebody came straight through about 20 feet in front of me. The flashing signs, and it was at night. I think the flashing signs are a great idea. You know, as far as financially wise, $15,000 for that, you know, it's a lot of money, but you know, it could save a life. And if it's one of the people that we know's lives, it's well worth it. That to me, I think this is well worth the money. That's just my opinion, but I believe that this is something that we should not mess around with.
Sheila.
So I just want to say I really appreciate this conversation because I think we've gotten a few important things from it. A, that the questions we're getting tonight show us clearly the changes we're going to have to make, either I would think to the article language to ensure that they're very clear on exactly what we are getting and why we are getting it, i.e. referencing the fact that a professional study was done. Because the fact that they came up here tonight with all the documentation that we have here in front of us, they will come up on the floor. And if we are committed as a group to placing and supporting this article out of all of them because of the situations we've had there in the recent past, I think, you know, we're gonna have to make sure we can pretty easily explain it, if that makes sense. And it sounds like that's headed in the right direction. Dave, I hear you. I haven't had a close call the way it sounds like you just did, but I know many who have, and we certainly have a pretty sizable resident population that feels really strongly about this one, and we've been talking about it a long time. This is one of those that, despite the fact that, you know, you sit there and go, well, you could put this off until the fall, I don't know that this is the one. Yeah.
Mike, could you bring a map, have a map in the handout so they know exactly where this is? That will save a lot of questions.
Absolutely. I can even have a picture of what we'd be getting.
We could probably put the study online now.
Yeah.
We can make it available on the website.
Yep. No, that was already in the plans for next week.
But I just want to say we made every effort to study the intersection thoroughly. Got a third party in to make sure that we weren't impacted by some of the potentially political factors, and I do think they came up with a pretty good solution.
Pete.
So there's an example of this in Hubbardston at 140 and 68. Would there be, is it at all possible to be able to get from the Hubbardston chief some statistic to say what it might have been prior to the installation of that sign and what it has been since? so that you can use that to justify it, I guess.
You can certainly ask. It's the same exact situation that you see on the intersections of 62 and 68 as well in Hubbardston.
Right.
And where there was a bad accident just yesterday too. So it's not saying this is going to prevent every accident from happening, but at least it'll stop the number, because the engineer and the chief, Chief Monaco, were both surprised at just when you put it all together how many accidents we have at that one intersection, and more surprising that none of them happen at peak traffic hours.
No kidding.
All right, any other comments, questions?
Can I ask one question before we go on?
Sure.
Is there any wisdom, Michael, in packaging the whole thing together and trying to fund it with Chapter 90 funds?
Rather than free cash?
Yeah. If the situation is that dire.
Can we do it? Yes. Is it allowed under Chapter 90 funding? Yes. I think it'd be the opinion of these two groups as to whether we go forth with a free cash expenditure or a Chapter 90 expenditure to purchase these.
I think the overarching concern, Joe, and you know it better than probably we do, is we have never had enough Chapter 90 money to do the road work we need to do. We do not subsidize that money the way other towns do. Even the town of Princeton, with far less road miles than we do, I think they throw in more than $250,000 a year towards extra, work, in addition to Chapter 90. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
I thought I would ask. That's all.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is about the Chapter 90, and could our Chapter 90 funding be altered based on the state budget? Flux in the state budget.
Yes. Any chapter money we receive, 90, 70, 32A, whatever you want to call it, everything's up in the air at this point.
All the chapters.
It's all going to change.
Whole book.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to 7. And I think everybody's on Article 6. We've had a lot of discussion on it. And, it sounds to me like we need to get it done, but
Article 7. I'm going to read real quick, and then I did go back and get the images as requested by the Finance Committee. So it's appropriating $6,000 from free cash to dispose of tree debris at the DPW yard. The last Finance Committee meeting asked to see these images, and I just uploaded them, and I'm trying to. Once I find where those are, I will put those up on the screen. If you want to start talking about that, feel free.
So this is getting rid of the stuff behind the barn, right?
Yes.
It's the word we were told was it's a fire hazard, and it's close to the buildings, and we there's no way we can do it. Joe, do you have any comments on all of this?
I wanted to clean it up. It's been there for several. I guess it started in the ice storm and just kept getting worse. As more trees came down, the pile just kept getting bigger, and I wanted to handle it properly.
Would the state have a piece of equipment that they?
The pictures that Mike is going to post really tell the story.
Okay.
It's unfortunate. They actually do.
Is it dangerous in any way?
It's definitely a fire hazard. I don't know if I would say it's dangerous to the general public unless they're out walking around back there.
Which they shouldn't be.
No, they shouldn't be.
And all of it is wood, etc., that cannot be reused. It couldn't be picked up by a farmer or...
No. We've definitely gone down that road tried to get some people to take it. No.
Okay.
All right, and here they are. Are you guys able to see that?
Yep.
So that's one. Then This is it from another angle. And this is the third angle that should be loading shortly.
I'm sorry, I can take a laptop out there right now and walk you through it. It's raining.
What else is new?
So, Joe, how long is, if you get the approval, how long is it going to take to get this thing cleaned up?
Oh, probably about a day and a half if you get the right gear.
Okay.
And the state wouldn't have any equipment they could bring in and help us out by getting rid of this, Joe?
Not that I know of, no.
Joe, is the plan to chip it all? Is that the
Just grind it up and chip it.
Are you guys renting equipment or are you hiring a company to do it?
I'd probably hire somebody, Dave, because some of it has to be sheared.
Yeah, right.
Jeff, I see you have your hand raised. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Joe, what was your plan to use that lot for? Would that be able to supplement parking behind the library?
No, it's just it's currently DPW gravel and pipe storage.
So when we have more tree work, where are we going to put them now?
Excellent.
It's a great question, Karen. And if you saw the DPW budget, we actually included a forestry line item. We didn't fund it very much, but over time we're going to have to start coming up with a management plan for debris like this.
We do not own a chipper in town.
We own chip. We do own a chipper, and we do own a. We're part of the code that gives us access to a chipper, but nothing that could manage the size that's here.
No, but I mean on an ongoing basis, if it's in your budget.
No, if it's in our budget, we'd probably still have to hire someone every couple of years to come in and manage it so it doesn't get us out of control.
Okay.
Karen, the problem is their chipper can't take wood that big, so they need like a grinder, basically.
And I don't think you'd see this, once you got caught up on it, I don't think you'd see this volume. It would take you 2 or 3 years to get anywhere near this. I take that back, unless, of course, God forbid, we have another ice storm or some kind of similar event.
This is definitely not burnable in a safe location.
Say again?
So
there's no place that you could actually do a controlled burn with this?
No.
Why not? Why can't they burn this or part of it? Burn houses down in a controlled manner.
I could actually definitely ask the police chief, but as far as I know, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, we were informed by Chief Knight that he thought that would be an unlawful burn.
Is there a pile, not the same size, but close to it up in the old hospital property too?
Some of there is a pile in the hospital property as well. I looked at that today. It's not as big, but I think before I got here, some folks may have disposed of some of the stuff that was at the hospital property off the edge or buried some of it. But there is one there as well.
You'd be surprised how many trees we have buried in town.
No, I wouldn't.
I was. But.
Mike, we talked about some alternative funding in one of the old articles. Do you want to discuss that?
Yes, there's an old article that we might be able to take funding from. However, our accountant, Dan, is looking to see if that article actually still has money in it. It's coming up differently depending on how you choose to run the expense report. If you run it one way, it shows a balance. If you run it another way, it shows it was expended earlier. So we're just double checking that before we put it on the motions.
So, Joe, what happens if this doesn't get done? To your operation?
It doesn't hinder our operation. We can still add to the pile. It's just that you now know you have a fire hazard on your property and you have to deal with it.
Okay.
If it's a fire hazard, why are we adding to the pile, though? I guess is my question.
Well, at some point, Mitch, we're still going to continue tree-related operations. Trees die along roadways in town. And we don't necessarily, some of it gets used as firewood, some of it gets chipped, but you still have the potential of adding to the pile, but it's going to be on such a small scale. I don't think, unless of course, like I said, we have a major event, that I don't think you'd notice the impact.
Okay.
I think we wait until you give us an answer about that extra money and see if there's anything we can do with that. I think that I'd like to see, if there is money that we can use, then I would much rather use it.
No, I understand. Mike and I reviewed those today.
Yes, like I said, Dan is just checking because of the 2 different ways it's showing up on the report, which is a glitch in the software that we're also checking.
Yeah, that scares you too.
Any other questions?
Nope. Anybody else?
Good.
Okay. So we'll have to wait for some more information. All right, number 8.
This is an article similar to how we had the senior center walkway, community center walkway earlier in the meeting. In the spring of 2011, there was a vote to appropriate money for repairs to the water tanks. This is to take the remaining $100,000 that is in there to do work on our other water tank. It's there, it's for a similar use, it's just for a different tank than what was specified in that article. And this is work that Department of Environmental Protection has requested we do on our tanks as part of our consent order process to be able to increase our draw for Mushkapog. This is just to be as transparent as possible, Mike. These aren't storage tanks. These are they're sand filters that are in the treatment plant. They are tanks that require repair. We have one going right now, or plan to start this summer. We've already got the bid and the contractor on board.
So the money's already there. It's just sitting, waiting to be spent.
Correct.
Yes, it's in an account. It's in an account from 2011. And the original article read engineering construction of water storage tank and rehabilitation of existing tank. We want to use it to rehabilitate 2 filters at the treatment facility.
So
the current bid is $47,000 for the one we got. There's 3 tanks in total, or 3 filters in total. The one being reconditioned where the media is changed and repainted right now. The bid we have is $47,000 plus or minus.
Mitch, I see your hand is up.
Oh, actually, Joe, you just answered pretty much all of my questions, so thank you.
Oh, okay.
So the question I had, so Joe, the money that you're talking about was appropriated for the 2 outside storage tanks on Rice Hill over there.
Yep.
We built a new tank, and then there was money appropriated to rehabilitate the original tank that was there.
Yep.
So this is money left over from that, and you're going to use it for inside the water treatment building itself.
Yep.
For those media tanks that are in there.
Yes.
Okay.
And we don't have a total number on that. This 100,000 is just the total amount that was showing in that account.
Correct.
I can tell you the bid I have right now for the one that we're doing. There are 3. It's around 47,000, 46,500, 47,000. You can't do them all at once because you have to have 2 running at any one time to be able to provide water for town. So once we get one done, we'll move on to another. The cost for the media, the cost for the labor, that may vary over time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we use the bulk of that.
Okay.
Well,
Ted?
Since this is for the sand filter tanks or the media filter tanks in the water treatment, we should probably change the wording so that it doesn't say for repairs the water storage tanks.
Yes, that's a me one right there. I will take care of that. I took the old article and repurposed it that way. Ted, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah. Someone is likely to ask if this money originated from kind of general funds, or was it paid for by those folks that are water users? And I don't know if that's important to be able to answer that question.
Does someone who was...
I think they were paid by water, Mike, and they're still being paid by water utility.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it's... I would assume...
Outstanding.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
would,
still on the bills.
yeah. I would assume that this is paid from water rates, so that's why it's going toward water uses rather than...
But it's a very good question.
Yeah.
And it will come up.
Yeah.
I think it's another one that gets back to us having the language from the original Article 25, which I certainly remember was a very large conversation to start repairing those water tanks. And I vaguely remember why there were some savings at the time. But yeah, if we can be able to reference for people there that night what the original article was. And yes, there's no question that those monies were water specific.
And they're going back to water specific issues, so.
Yeah.
So, but is this article being on the warrant, taking it off doesn't free up $100,000, right?
Correct. This is already appropriated in an account.
So I think that becomes important in any conversation.
All right, anything else? All right, let's move on. Number 9.
Similar situation here. This is to transfer from an appropriation that we have left over from May of 2015. This is not new money. It's just moving from an old money, $30,017.74 for CCTV work. And Director Buck, we can talk more about that because that's his wheelhouse.
Sorry, I just have to keep making sure I'm actually on speaker. There was some sewers that were constructed in the Forest Hill and on Forest Hill Drive and in Christmas Tree Lane. We have folks in town doing CCTV or closed circuit TV inspection of sewers. We had the existing money. My hope was to use it to go back and TV those sewers, make sure there are no leaks in any of them, and do a formal as-built so we have good records. Any questions?
Well, so from the perspective, Joe, of the specific area you're looking at, is there any indication that the work needs to be able to be done? I mean, do you have any inference that might say that there's leaks going on, or there's a loss of...
Going forward, industry standard would require that you would TV any new sewers.
Okay.
And we have a lot of leaks in town, so it's in our best interest to make sure that these are TV'd as part of an acceptance process. This work was done by the town. I think it's in our best interest to be able to close it out properly and make sure everything works as intended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, the original appropriation was for work on the Forest Hill Drive and Christmas Tree Lane sewer, and then we're just asking to reappropriate this instead of doing the building to do the CCT work on those same lines?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
By means of example, if we were to put sewers in Main Street tomorrow, you'd want to carry a line item for CCTV inspection and pressure testing and make sure you properly as-built them so you know where everything is. All we're doing is closing it out.
Sounds good. Any other questions? All right, let's move down to the fire department one. I think we should go to.
Okay, you want to skip Article 10, which is just the annual report?
Yeah, I would skip all of the, let's get to, the things the numbers we don't really have right now, so.
Okay. Article 16 then is where we are, and this is to appropriate the sum of $14,086.80 to purchase a Lucas 3 CPR machine for the fire department.
All right. Comments?
Yeah, when I need it, I'd be in favor for it.
What, Pete? I'm sorry.
When I need it, I'd be in favor for it.
Do we have any CPR at all capabilities right now?
All of our paramedics and EMTs are trained in manual CPR. We do not have a CPR machine at this point.
Is that unusual in most towns to not have something like that?
To not have one, yes.
Yeah,
No, I thought that somebody had said there was one in one ambulance, but not in the other ambulance. Did I not hear that?
Correct. We have 2 ambulances, and in fact, and I was going to bring this up at the end of the meeting, but the town of Ocam has officially asked us to take over their ambulance services and enter into negotiations for an IMA on that. So we potentially will soon have 3 ambulances. But Chief Knipe thought it'd be easier to ask for one at a time than all 3 up front when they are expensive machines.
Okay, so I was wrong what I heard, because somebody told me that there was one already, and this was the second one that we needed.
No, so this would be you could get one
already too.
Yeah, Mike, real quick, this is Mitch. Seth did present this to CIPC, that we did have an ambulance that had a better capability.
Mitch, you just cut out.
Now, am I here?
Okay, yep, now you gotcha.
Okay, and that one of the other ambulances had something that completes the same task, or this machine, and the other ambulance did not have this capability, which really made it an interesting ask, because realistically, for example, if you have 2 cardiac events that go on at the same time in town,
right,
you're going to have one patient that has an ambulance that has a CPR machine, and then another patient that's going to have manual CPR performed all the way to the the hospital, which is a very different process. So just an interesting tidbit.
We can get that for sure answer. I can get that for sure answers too.
Mitch, what is the CDIC saying?
I can't speak on behalf of CPIC because the group has not met to, I guess, kind of iron out the formal recommendations. But the conversation went really well, and I think Seth had indicated, and I think I conveyed this at the last meeting we had with just the select board, that he was actually initially going to put this off as part of his capital plan for next year. And I think that several members of the board encouraged him to put it on this year, because after he explained what it was, felt that it was something worth considering and at least taking a look at.
So, several members of what?
Jeff, CIPC.
Oh, CIPC. I was just going to say, this is not my recollection at all of the conversation we had last week about this machine. It's my understanding, recollection, that the ALS ambulance had a unit, and this was a second one from the backup ambulance.
That could be. I may have just not remembered that.
I mean, it's relevant for the conversation of whether you're going to have another one, or this is the leap forward into something that's a new and relevant piece of equipment. But that was my recollection, is that they have one. This is a second one for the backup ambulance. I think it matters.
What about Hubbardston? Would they be paying? I mean, wouldn't they take part of that money? I mean, wouldn't they maybe provide us with one for the one that they're asking us to take over, or how does that work?
I'm not sure what Ocam has on their ambulance in terms of equipment, nor have we begun those negotiations with them yet. I was just saying that they did submit a formal ask that we enter into negotiations with them. Wayne?
Would that be something we would want to have a little more information about before we go spending $15,000 or even placing it?
Yes, I mean, like I said, it's something we can certainly look into. Wayne, I'm just going to unmute you here because you're muted, and then that should work. All right, no, you're muted. Can you hit your button? There you go.
Yeah, is that better?
Yep.
All right. I was just looking at my notes from the last meeting we had, and my notes show that the discussion was that we did have one a unit in one of our ambulances, but the other ambulance did not have it. That's from my notes from the last meeting.
And that I did just double check that with the chief, and that is correct.
And that's what I recall too, Wayne.
And I'd reiterate the comment earlier that if one ambulance has one and you have 2 calls, somebody's getting state-of-the-art equipment and the other person is not. When we have the capabilities to have both vehicles with the same equipment, so I think this is a critical item myself.
So would we potentially end up sending one of our ambulances to one of the other towns and then not have the equipment available because it's out on call?
If we get a mutual aid call, yes, that happens all the time.
I was trying to think of other words.
Yeah. Jefferson. Yeah. Jeff, I see your hands up. Yeah. But yes, that happens all the time where we have a mutual aid call and an ambulance has to go out of town to Barry or to Oakham, Hubbardston, somewhere like that. And if that's the one that has the CPR machine, then and we get a local call, then the local call doesn't get the CPR machine.
Okay.
Real quick, Mike. I think with most issues involving the ambulance, it almost pays for itself, right? I believe the ambulance budget almost equals itself. A machine like this, in advance, would be considered advanced, right? So that's probably billable. So it may, I mean, it's kind of gory to talk about, but it may be an expense that pays for itself through the billing, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And there again, I think at the beginning of this whole meeting and talking about grants, you know, was there a grant? Is there a grant that could possibly become available?
I think, can I just, I know that you just mentioned the grant thing. Because of what's going on right now, I would think that this piece of equipment in particular, it may be attractive for a funder, and I know Seth's been really good at pursuing those grants. But there's going to be a lot of avenues for this kind of equipment coming from state and federal as well.
And I would just add to that too, that there are grants that are becoming available for ambulance equipment. Whether this is something that would be considered eligible for that, I'm not sure, particularly now that both the federal government and the Commonwealth have lifted the restrictions on local ambulances having ventilators located on the ambulance itself. I feel like a lot of the grants that'll come out for ambulance equipment will go towards purchasing ventilators, which are 10 to 20,000 a piece, before they'll go for something like a CPR machine, just because of the current pandemic situation, because CPR isn't something you use to treat COVID-19. However, I would also be wary of grant funding in general next year, because if revenues are down on the operating budget of both the state and federal government, the place that gets cut first is from grant program.
Like, just to kind of push back, I don't want to push back that a little bit, but
yeah,
you're seeing a lot of the private foundations and private funders in the region specifically targeting health initiatives right now. And those are the opportunities that I think are going to be growing, working with different municipal entities and community-based organizations. As well as, I mean, obviously the state's going to be looking at different things, but we're seeing a lot of opportunity for different things to kind of help right now from the private foundations.
So I think from a timing perspective on this one, the decision that our two groups need to make is whether or not we're willing to let this particular piece of equipment, which let's face it, the majority of ambulances for a very long time did without, and a community like Oakham continues to do without, unless they get a higher level response team coming in at the paramedic level. Anyway, whether or not we kind of let that one ride and see if it is able to be obtained in another manner. I don't know that we would be able to obtain it in another manner more quickly than we would through town meeting. So I guess it comes down to how fast a piece of equipment we think we need.
Well, I know I'm saying that we've got some monies on here that we're using, that we want to use free cash for, and I'm thinking that $14,000 to save somebody's life is well worth it.
And I would agree with that.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments? All right, I think the only other one that's money is the one that we really can't do anything or talk. It's the sign, and that's a citizen's petition that has been put forward already, if I'm correct.
Correct. I will pull that up. It's submitted by Mr. Louis Canacchioli.
14 Blueberry Lane.
14 Blueberry Lane.
18.
18.
It's 18.
Right, it says that.
Oh, apologies. 18. How could I forget?
And that's an awful lot of money. It's $30,000, but again, it's got to be put forward.
Yeah, but Ian, would we be recommending approval or not approval on this?
we will, yes.
It's a lot of money.
I have, since this first came up, obviously it has to be put on if we have enough signatures, but I'd rather spend it for the ambulance and for the CPR, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is a nice thing to have, but for 30 grand, I wouldn't want to vote for it.
Now, in total transparency, I guess this article was really submitted before this whole COVID-19 really took place. So
at the top, it was submitted on the 5th of December.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I understand that at the time, the way the economy was going, we were flush with money. Now maybe not so much. So
even being flush with money, who cares? It's still, unless you're just really loaded, which we've never been really loaded. Anyway, I've said my piece. Karen?
We weren't flush with money, ever.
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 Well, I mean, philosophically, as a country, I think.
This is out of free cash, or is this a new item?
This would be out of free cash.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Mitch?
The select board has no choice but to put it on the warrant. I mean, it's a citizen's petition, so it has to go on unless the citizens. My understanding, I think, Mike, is if they can withdraw it, but that's the only person that could do anything about it.
Everyone who signed it would have to withdraw it. Yes. And Mitch, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. If we honestly, we talked a little bit about this last meeting, the select board meeting last week. If we really just, at the point, I think we're going to be making some hard decisions, and I know Karen's been echoing this. You know, with what's coming down the pike, there's a lot of uncertainty with the state. I think we just level with the public that are there, and I really think the reception to that will be taken well. This isn't a life-saving item like some of the others we've talked about. I know it's wanted, and I know the reason why it is wanted, and it would be a nice luxury to have. But I really think that I truly believe that if we have that conversation and say, look, this is something that we want too, but we have to put off because of the reality of what's going on right now. I really want to believe that the town meeting public will really see that favorably.
All right. Well, we need to bring it up and talk about it. And any other comments? All right. I think that.
Just one more. Just one more. Article 21 has to be discussed.
21?
Yep, that's a street survey.
Oh, yes, Joe.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Joe, this is a street survey to be done on the street that connects Main Street to the Heights property, from Maple Avenue to the Heights property at this, right up until the point where Central Tree Middle School is located, and you can see a change in the pavement. That is a town-owned road. From that point at CTMS to Main Street is not a town-owned road. This would be a survey on that to start the process of the town eventually accepting that as a town street. And Director Buck, we can talk further about that.
Michael, before we go too far, we had talked earlier today about looking again at some different funding operations. So do you want to just table this and verify that? I mean, I'm more than willing to speak to the substance of the article, but I think it's prudent that we look at the financing first.
It's fine with me if it's fine with the two groups.
I mean, Joe, you've got us all here. I think what everybody wants to hear on all of these free cash articles is how desperate is it?
It isn't desperate. That's why Mike and I had talked earlier today about that. This one's not desperate, but basically to be able to use again Chapter 90 money to improve the roadway between roughly Central Tree Middle School and Main Street, because it's technically a driveway. We'd have to make it a road, and this is what you'd need. This survey is what you need to do to be able to lay it out as a road.
So would that, Joe, make it a throughway?
Yes.
And does that mean traffic control by the schools and?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is $12,000 that we could spend to do a study and then find out.
No, Karen,
Yeah.
it's not a study. No, this is the surveyor's cost.
Oh.
So currently, the school department has 2 large parcels there.
Yep.
Okay. They're the schools are situated on. This would delineate roughly a 50-foot right-of-way across the school department property from the end of Hospital Drive to Main Street.
Okay.
It's not a study. It's just the survey cost to accurately delineate the road.
And what?
So that we have it deeded as a right-of-way.
Okay, so then we deed it as a right-of-way, and then we don't have to do anything else to it. We can decide to bring it in, accept it as a road in the fall if we wanted to. Is that what the goal is? Okay.
Yep. There's no otherwise. Michael, you can review the cost. So the cost structure to making improvements to a driveway via the school or otherwise, the cap. It's
the $30,000 cap.
Right.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
So if we spend, if it's under 30,000, school pays for it. If it's over 30,000, we pay for it. We had to pay for all the costs of the repairs to the drainage that Joe did on it last year. If you remember at the fall town meeting, we put free cash to fund Joe's budget to kind of replenish that account because that was a need that came up when the school year started. This would make it so that we could use Chapter 90 money to fund that rather than our general operating budget.
So
go ahead, please.
I just want to add some complications to this. So everybody, they're not really complications, but they're more details to the background on this one. 2 of them, which are, one just got brought up, the fact that we own the school buildings and that the school properties, and this would be considered a capital project of a very large scale. The other is that this brings back a topic that has come up over and over a little bit, particularly when we talk about RDIC and the development of Heights property, and that is that there was a budget back in, I want to say it was 2014, that included language that, as part of a bond bill, could have given the town $900,000 towards repair and upgrade to this section of the property. That is not money sitting there for us. It was just part of a bond bill, and maybe the money could be found in an appropriation sometime at some point. And what the state has consistently told us about this is that we would clearly have to show some good faith effort on our part in order to have any chance in hell at getting a bond bill appropriation like that even looked at. Is that going to happen in the coming year? It's even less likely than it was in the past 5 years since it was put on that 2014 bond bill. That said, we're going to have to start somewhere. Do we start today? Do we start with this warrant? I don't know, but that's the history on that, and that's what Joe's trying to get started.
I have to tell you, the repairs that we made the last go round were absolutely necessary. It was quite dangerous.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, it continues to be dangerous. The sidewalks are in tough shape. There's an enormous amount of bus traffic, school traffic, and even just already, to Pete's question, drive-through traffic, even though it is not technically a road.
And has anyone driven down Palmagussit Road lately? That's in pretty poor shape too.
I would be inclined to agree.
And let's not forget about the sidewalks in Maple Ave.
Yep.
We need a lot. We all know that.
Yeah.
Let's see what you guys can do with that and see if it makes sense on the 12th. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, what we would end up doing would be to go after another unused article and reallocate some funds. That's about the only option we would have to pay for the surveying.
Yep. All right. Anything else? Comments?
Leah.
I have a quick question, maybe Mike or for FinCom. If there's a whole lot of talk about the potential of probably the likelihood of the school budget going into a 1/12 and how that would impact our town budget or whatever. Or if the town were to look at a 1/12, where does the majority of our spending happen? Is it the first half of the fiscal year, the second half of the fiscal year? If we were to go to 1/12, how does that look at the town on a month-to-month basis, I guess?
July in particular would be interesting. The months of July and January are the 2 months where we have the most spending historically. This is because a lot of our bills go on a 6-month basis or on an annual basis, be it either fiscal year or calendar year. So that is where we run into some issues and where we would have to pull from free cash. No doubt if we go into a 1/12 budget to fund some of our operations, just because of our contractual obligations are higher next year than they are this year. So the difference of that would have to be just directly taken out of free cash without an appropriation made at town meeting as allowed under the new statute to deal with the COVID crisis. So that would be where we would be in there. Once you go to the rest of the months, it fluctuates. But the 2 months that we have historically high spending are July and January for those annual and 6 month bill.
So how much of a deficit will we see in July?
I've asked Dan to start working on that, and he is getting me that number.
Okay, when you say it's interesting, is it interesting because you think you have a number, or?
Well, if you look at here, let me put it this way. If you look at the budget that we have in your folders on your Google Drives for next year, and you take the increase, divide that by 12, and you take last year's budget, divide that by 12, there's your difference. I just haven't done that math yet, and I want to make sure I have it all right, which is why I have Dan, who's used to those numbers and who's been with those numbers for the past 25 years, be the one to really look at that. But all those increases that we have in our union contracts, in our salaried contract, department heads, in our service contracts, none of those are going to change. We've already signed the contract that has those in. So those increases will be happening. I flatlined my salary, but I didn't do that to the other department heads that we have a contractual raise put in there just because we signed a legal document with them. So that's going to be where we'll have to pull directly from free cash, and then that's free cash we won't get back.
Well, and do we know we're going to have the free cash to be able to do that one? I mean,
yes.
You do know that?
Yes, it's whatever free cash we don't use at this upcoming town meeting. That's what we have left to pull from.
I think what you're asking is whether or not we will have free cash to certify for the fall, right? For a typical October, November town meeting, and we don't know the answer to that. In our worst years, recently, i.e. 15 years, we've had years where we were happy to look at $80,000 in free cash.
Right.
We had 800,000 this year.
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of that was grant funding that came in afterward.
Correct.
Or reimbursements that came in afterwards. So.
Correct. But Pete, to answer your question, how are we going to pay that difference in free cash in July if we have to pull from our free cash?
Right.
That's not off of next year's number that we get. What we pull from in July if we go into a 1/12 is anything we do not spend at this upcoming town meeting.
We don't spend. Okay.
But even more frightening, the legislation allows towns to spend over their tax rate and amortize out those over expenditures. Is it, Mike, over 3 years?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, I going to a 1/12 in normal times, right, is a failure. It's a failure of systems somewhere.
Yep.
Somebody couldn't come to a decision. Somebody couldn't come to an agreement. It's a little different this year because there's so much unknown ahead of us. And I think we're going to have to make a decision about whether we take what we know and go from there, or take no action at all and try to wait it out.
I'm just concerned that we've got too many people that are exceptionally optimistic about after this thing is done, that things are going to go off again. And I hate to be pessimistic. I've always been more conservative. I just don't see that happening. I think we're going to see a long time before this thing starts to come back together and we're back to where we would have been in normal times. There's some real risks to not addressing things now immediately, instead of allowing things just to take a formula and be applied.
Ian and Sheila, if I can just jump in real quick, if that's okay. I wanted to pull this up. This is our free cash expenditures for this town meeting warrant that we just went through. So if you'll see, we currently have $432,443 in free cash.
Right.
And it goes, column B is what each expenditure would cost, and column C is our running total. So if we were to fund everything in this proposed warrant right now that's coming out of free cash, we would have $108,913.06 left in free cash.
Right.
Now, say we pass everything at town meeting, and that's our number that we have. When we go into July, that's the number we have to pull from for our overages if it's not in that 1/12 budget.
Okay.
And the things that we can amortize over the next 3 years is restricted too. It's not just everything that we deficit spend on. It's only things that we deficit spend on as a direct result of our response to the COVID pandemic. So if we overspend in our cleaning supplies, I'm making these numbers up, it would never be like this, but just for easy math, if we overspend in cleaning supplies by $9,000, then over the next 3 years, on top of the tax rate, we'd be amortizing $3,000 a year, tacking that onto that, because we overspent our cleaning supply line item by that $9,000 amount. That doesn't include anything we spend next year for wages that's over, or for other contractual services that aren't cleaning related that we already had, electricity, things like that, that's just over. That we have to pull from somewhere, and that's going to be from free cash, and that's whatever we have left in column C at the end.
So I think the term is kicking the can down the road.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think, Pete, to your point, if we have an approved budget and it's based on a very specific cherry sheet, and come the time when the legislature actually approves a state budget, which might not be till October for all we know, and our state funding comes back looking really bad, right? All those chapter monies that Mike was talking about, we really only have three options that I can see in front of us, or some combination of them. That's tap into stabilization. Nobody wants to do it. Raise taxes. Nobody wants to do it. Or cut services. That's what else is there? That's what, right? That's the discussion we've been having in this town for a long time.
A couple of other things I'd like to add, included in your folders are a history of our free cash balances and our stabilization balances. Dan was out of the office and was using his OneDrive to do these, so these go back to 2010. He will be going back later on when he's at the office in Rutland, and going back a little further. I asked him to go back to the recession. That way we could see the hits we took around that time there. So you will be able to see some history there. And another thing I would like to note is we were just joined by Chief Knight, who can answer any other technical questions about his articles as well. I do see Ted has his hand up too.
Mike, what is the 200,000 in the budget?
So
the sheet you've got up.
Yeah, per the town's financial policies that were passed by both the select board and the finance committee in 2015, the town uses a minimum of $150,000 of free cash as supplemental budget revenue. So that's money to make sure we can fund our budget above and beyond what we collect in taxes, excise, other revenue, things like that. So the financial policies say we have to put at least 150. The budget was in a place that Dan and I bumped that to 200. Even though it's against both of our instincts to do that, just because we're in this place that we're in. So that is what that is there.
So that's that attempt to balance
The
next
budget.
year's budget as we know it now.
Yes.
Okay.
I will say this, and I say this every time, the Department of Revenue allows it, but highly recommends against it, because your free cash numbers change year after year after year. Like Sheila said earlier, one year we were happy that we got $80,000 in free cash. That's a lot less than 200. But if you're putting this in now, then you have to find a way to plug that 200 next year if you don't have that 200 in free cash next year. So it does create a structural deficit that we have to eventually find a way to get ourselves out of. But while we deal with what we have, it's a way to help us stay afloat. Wayne, I see you have your hand up.
Don't forget that 150,000 of that 200,000 is covering the 150,000 we put in last year.
Correct.
Yep, that's exactly how it works, unfortunately. All right.
I have another question going back to the 112th, if I may, just for my own personal clarification. 112th, on a monthly basis, if we don't spend, we lose it. That money does not get deferred to free cash. So say there's a light spending month, that we don't necessarily have bills that we have to pay out of that month's allotment. If we don't spend it, we lose it. It doesn't go to free cash. Is that true, or?
It falls into our raise and appropriate money that would eventually go towards the regular operating budget that we will eventually at one point in time hopefully pass at some point in time before the new year, in January. But the yes, how it works is you get that allotment there, and that's your allotment for July. And then for August, you have everything you didn't use in July plus your 1/12 for August. But again, July is the month where we have the historical most spending.
So that any extra for that month can get carried forward, I guess. I mean, okay. Yeah. So it wasn't clear to me if it had to be spent and then not if, you know, obviously our months fluctuate. So
yeah, the state doesn't come in and say you need to spend this money now. They'll say this is what you have. Using the term free cash isn't 100% accurate because free cash is what we get annually. But if it makes it easier to think of a monthly free cash that moves from one month to the next month, if that's the easy way to think of it, that is actually a good analogy for it.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right. Is there any questions for the fire chief since he has joined us in regards to anything that we've had previous?
I just will say that I will double check on that answer from Leah too, just to be sure that is the case that we can carry forward. I'm not sure just because this is the first time municipalities have been allowed to do that. It's normally just regional school districts. And again, Seth is here for answers to any questions on his articles that he put forward. He just got back from MEMA, so that's why he had to join us a little later.
If I may, to Seth, does anyone mind? It's Leah. Seth, can you just talk a little bit about the CPR machine? That was the big question I think we had questions about, as to whether there currently is any one or any CPR machines in town or not, and just clarification on that.
Sure. The American Heart Association came out with a guidelines on the use of a automatic CPR machine, and there's been studies shown that have been done out in Seattle and California that have shown that the survival rate on patients that use this machine are much greater chance of survival. Currently, we have one machine on our primary ambulance. We do not have one on our secondary ambulance. Rutland now has seen an increase in ambulance call volume, that both ambulances are being used simultaneously multiple times during the week. So if the primary ambulance is already at the hospital and the next medical comes in that requires the use of the machine, we would not have the machine. The machine takes the place of two people, additional people, that it would take to do CPR for 25 minutes to the nearest hospital. In the back of a moving ambulance, it's very difficult, going through in and out of traffic and sudden stops. So this machine makes the quality of the CPR much better and more efficient, and the survival rate is increased dramatically.
Mitch, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, Seth, that's kind of what I tried to articulate earlier, because I know that you brought that to CIPC, and I think you definitely articulated that way more intelligently than I did. So thank you. But that's what I recall from that conversation. So I that's why I think we're pretty adamant about wanting to see that, if we could on this year's asks. So thank you for clarifying.
Seth, another question that was asked earlier is, with our ongoing discussions with the town of Oakham, how would us taking over their ambulance service affect this in any way, if at all?
The CPR machine would not affect the town of Oakham. Oakham currently has their own ambulance and their own CPR machine on their own ambulance. The MOU that's being drafted and being negotiated with the town of Oakham would include the town of Rutland taking ownership of their ambulance and all medical supplies and equipment, to be able to support the additional call volume, and we'd be utilizing the OCAM EMS staff to supplement our own staff.
So Seth, this is Pete O'Malley. I guess a question on liability, and I don't know if there is any or not, but if you have one machine that you're trying to service an area and one goes out with equipment and another doesn't, if the equipment that goes out doesn't have what it needs, would the town necessarily be at risk if someone was injured because of that?
The easiest answer, to your question would be no, because right now the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, through the Department of Public Health, does not make that device a mandatory device that needs to be on every ambulance. Right now, it's strongly suggested by the state, but is not recommended, obviously, because of the high cost to municipalities to outfit every ambulance. So that's why, you know, we've been doing CPR manually by hand for the last 100+ years. So we would, if we did not have the device, we would continue to operate as we always had.
Okay, thank you.
But if we do have it, you would end up having extra people still in town if there was that type of incident as well.
That's correct. For a cardiac arrest patient in the back of an ambulance, it takes a minimum of 4 to 5 people to properly staff and transport that patient to the hospital because of all the skills that are necessary to be done and the fatigue loss of doing CPR manually on a patient for 20 to 25 minutes. This machine would take the place of 2 additional people to cut it down to 3 people being only required in the back of the ambulance.
Any other questions? Oh, I appreciate that, Seth. I think so. It sounds like everybody's had their questions and answers. Hello?
Yep.
Sheila?
Yes. Good. I think we're good.
Nope.
All right.
I really
So
appreciate this conversation.
I think it's been good, and we'll see where we go from here, and see what you guys talk about and what you guys come up with for the warrant, and then we will, you know, certainly go through it. But I think you guys at least have a good idea of where we're thinking, and I think we've got some concerns out there, and hopefully Mike gets back to us, and we can do this again in another couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
So,
like motion to adjourn from the board, unless did somebody?
Sheila, let me just ask a question of Ian. What would be the expectation for next Thursday evening?
I'm hoping to have our regular meeting at 6 o'clock and go over some of the sewer and water budget, and see if we have any other further answers from Mike at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Can I, before we adjourn quickly, I guess I was kind of hoping, not from this meeting, but to have a sense from FinCom, their sense on a 1/12 versus not for the town. I think that was one of the big conversations we as a board had on last Thursday night and the previous Monday night as to the pros and cons of that. And I think it's important to have FinCom's input for that. So maybe if you can have conversation next week, I think it's a lot to try to dive into tonight, but.
That's fine. Yeah, we have not talked about that, and just based on what we're waiting to try to hear some numbers as well. I mean, it's as you know, it's difficult. We don't have hard numbers, and we just have to see where we're at. But yeah, we can definitely talk about it, and next time we have a meeting, we'll let you, we'll be able to talk about it more.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I get a motion to adjourn from the board.
Motion to adjourn to the BOS.
Second.
Roll call.
Walker, aye.
City, aye.
Stillings, aye.
Whiteman, aye.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Thank
you guys.
For having us.
All right, FinCom. We take a motion to adjourn.
We have minutes to go over.
You have a
We
set
do.
of,
You are correct.
you Yes.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
All right. We have a motion on the minutes.
I make a motion to approve as written for the April 16th meeting.
Second.
Carol seconds. Question?
Carol can't second. She was absent.
Oh,
Oh, even if I read the minutes, I can't second it?
no, you have to be present.
Because you weren't there.
I have a second from somebody else. David, thank you. Comments, questions, changes? No, all in favor of accepting the minutes? David. Roll call. Ted? Carol?
Can I even vote?
Aye.
Oh, no, you can't. That's my fault, sorry.
Okay.
I'm used to you being there. Dave?
Approve.
Karen?
Approve.
Peter?
I approve.
And Thomas?
Aye.
And Ted, we got you first, so motion is passed. Any new business? Any old business? I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I make a motion
Do
we
you have a
adjourn.
second? Do you have a second?
Second.
Tom?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Ted?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
Motion is passed.